The luxurious Skylux Airlines flight operating the New York-Dubai route was in the process of boarding. This was one of the most expensive flights in the world, where a first-class ticket could cost tens of thousands of dollars per seat. Beyond that, the aircraft featured an exclusive VIP suite, a lavish area reserved for society's elite, billionaire entrepreneurs, A-list celebrities, and even royalty. As the boarding gate bustled with activity, Marcus Blackwell, 45, CEO of Blackwell Global, walked toward the priority lane with his wife Vanessa, 42, a brilliant and sharp-witted attorney, and their son Nathan, 10, intelligent and quick-witted. Marcus wore a simple black dress shirt and trousers. Vanessa was clad in an elegant but understated dress, and Nathan sported a hoodie and jeans like any other child his age. Their appearance was relatively modest compared to the ultra-wealthy passengers surrounding them. Yet, there was an undeniable air of confidence in Marcus's stride and a keen awareness in Vanessa's gaze, traits of those who were anything but ordinary. Near the boarding gate, Linda Harper, 50, the head flight attendant, was reviewing the VIP passenger list. With her neatly pinned-up hair, impeccably pressed uniform, and a demeanor so professional it bordered on icy, Linda took great pride in being one of Skylux Airlines' finest crew members. However, what she prided herself on even more was her ability to evaluate passengers. And today, as she caught sight of the Blackwell family, a flicker of doubt flashed in her eyes. As Marcus, Vanessa, and Nathan approached the VIP suite, Linda quickly stepped toward them, her expression unreadable, her voice deliberate and authoritative. "Excuse me, but I believe you may be in the wrong section." The words made a few surrounding passengers glance over. A middle-aged man in an expensive Armani suit raised an eyebrow at the remark. A group of European tourists, engaged in conversation, suddenly went silent, their curiosity piqued. In the world of luxury flights, the question of who belonged in the VIP suite was always a delicate matter. Marcus arched an eyebrow slightly, his expression calm as if completely unsurprised. Tilting his head, he slowly reached into his pocket and retrieved 3 first-class tickets printed on Skylux Airlines' signature silver foil. "These are our tickets. You're welcome to check them." Linda took the tickets, but rather than giving them the quick glance she had afforded other VIP passengers, she scrutinized them carefully, her eyes scanning each detail as though searching for a mistake. "VIP suite?" Linda murmured, her brows knitting together as she read the words. There was a hint of skepticism in her tone, as if she couldn't quite believe this family had access to the most expensive seats on the flight. Vanessa immediately sensed the condescension in Linda's voice. She had encountered these looks before. As a woman of color in the elite legal world, she had often faced the silent scrutiny of those who questioned whether she truly belonged. But this was the first time she was being asked to prove she deserved a service she had already paid for in full. Nathan, only 10 years old but remarkably perceptive, also picked up on the tension. He clutched his mother's hand tightly, his large eyes scanning the surroundings before whispering, "Mom, why is she looking at us like that?" Vanessa gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, offering him a soft smile, but inside, an anger had begun to smolder. "Yes, the VIP suite," Marcus replied firmly, his gaze steady on Linda. "We booked it a month ago. Is there an issue?" Linda pressed her lips together but maintained a falsely polite tone. "There's no issue, Mr. Blackwell. However, our system occasionally experiences errors. I'll need to verify something. Please wait a moment." With that, she briskly walked away, heading toward the service desk, leaving the Blackwell family standing there, under the quiet but unmistakable scrutiny of those around them. Vanessa crossed her arms, her expression hardening as she watched Linda retreat. "She doesn't believe we belong here, Marcus. She doesn't think we deserve to be in the VIP suite." Marcus exhaled quietly, the composed look in his eyes sharpening. He had faced situations like this countless times in the finance world, where people judged you at a glance, only to regret their mistake moments later. Leaning slightly toward Vanessa, he murmured, "Stay calm. Let's see what she does next." Meanwhile, Linda reached the service desk and dialed an internal number. Her voice was taut, but laced with a quiet arrogance. "I need a verification," she murmured to the ground staff. "There's a family in the VIP suite that I'm not entirely sure qualifies as priority passengers. Can you check their booking?" A brief silence followed. Then the ground staff responded, sounding slightly perplexed. The Blackwell family? Their reservation was confirmed a month ago. Their tickets are the highest tier available on this flight. Is there a problem? Linda's body stiffened slightly. A wave of irritation washed over her. She had misjudged someone she shouldn't have. But instead of returning to apologize, Linda made a worse decision. She doubled down. No problem at all, she said quickly before hanging up. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her uniform, smoothed out her silk scarf, and strode back toward the VIP suite with a risky choice in mind. She had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. Linda marched back into the VIP suite with rigid steps, as if trying to conceal her unease. But instead of apologizing and guiding the Blackwell family to their seats, she maintained her firm stance, acting as though she still had control of the situation. She refused to admit that she had been wrong from the very beginning. When she reached them, she didn't immediately return their tickets. Instead, she stood tall, letting her gaze sweep over each member of the Blackwell family before speaking in a flat but icy tone. Mr. Blackwell, we are experiencing some difficulties in verifying your seating arrangement. I'm afraid your family will need to temporarily relocate to the economy section while we sort this out. The entire VIP suite seemed to freeze for a moment. The air grew heavy. A few passengers glanced at each other, while others craned their necks to observe the unfolding situation. Vanessa stiffened, and Nathan, confused, tightened his grip on his mother's hand. The boy looked up at Marcus, as if waiting for his father to do something to stop this from happening. Marcus stood still, his gaze sharp as a blade, his voice steady yet carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of danger. I don't understand. You're telling me that my family, who booked these seats a month ago, needs to vacate the VIP suite and move to economy? Based on what reason? Linda remained composed, but this time her voice lacked the confidence it had before. As I said, there are some technical issues with the reservation system. We just need to verify the details, and to ensure the flight proceeds smoothly, we need your cooperation. Vanessa let out a dry chuckle, but her eyes burned with barely contained fury. So, are you asking all VIP passengers to leave their seats for verification? Or is it just my family? That question struck deep, and a flicker of discomfort crossed Linda's face. Around them, murmurs began to ripple through the cabin as the other passengers noticed the oddity in Linda's handling of the situation. A middle-aged man in a navy blue suit, wearing a gleaming Rolex, turned to his wife and muttered, "They have tickets! Why the extra scrutiny? Something's not right." Another passenger, a well-dressed blonde woman, frowned. I've flown with Skylux for years, and I've never seen anyone asked to leave the VIP suite to confirm their tickets. But Linda remained stubborn. She could feel her control slipping away, and that only made her more desperate to assert her authority. I don't want to escalate this. Her voice dropped slightly, but there was an edge to it. But if you do not comply, I will have to call security. The word security had barely left Linda's lips before everything exploded. Vanessa's grip on Nathan tightened, her heartbeat pounding in her chest. They had done nothing wrong, yet here they were, being threatened with security in front of their child. Marcus took a slow, deep breath, then stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Linda's. Go ahead. His voice wasn't raised, but each word carried weight. I'd love to see who has the guts to forcibly remove my family without a legitimate reason. Linda took a slight step back, realizing she had pushed too far. She had maneuvered herself into a position with no graceful way out. Nathan, despite being just a child, sensed the tension in the air. Quietly, he pulled out his phone, hit the record button, and started live streaming. Within minutes, Nathan's video spread like wildfire across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. A family being removed from the VIP suite despite having valid tickets? What is Skylux Airlines doing? This is blatant discrimination. The hashtag discrimination in the sky began trending worldwide. CEOs, journalists, and influencers started sharing the video. Elsewhere, at Skylux Airlines headquarters, an urgent phone call was made. Did you just downgrade the CEO of a major investment firm that holds shares in our airline to economy? Marcus Blackwell isn't just a VIP passenger. He has controlling interests in Skylux Airlines. In the cockpit, the captain received a direct order from the airline's CEO. Get the Blackwell family back in the VIP suite. Handle this professionally. At that very moment, Linda Harper's internal messaging system buzzed with a high-priority notification from upper management. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. Linda swallowed hard, a cold chill running down her spine. Outside, Marcus Blackwell remained standing, his gaze as sharp as a blade, while Vanessa held Nathan's hand firmly, maintaining her composure. They had done nothing, yet the world was already moving on their behalf. The tension in the VIP suite was suffocating. Every passenger was now watching Linda, waiting to see her next move. And in that moment, Linda realized she had completely lost control. Linda Harper stood frozen in the middle of the VIP suite, her eyes beginning to show traces of panic as she realized the situation was spiraling out of her control. The surrounding passengers were no longer passive observers. They whispered among themselves, some had even pulled out their phones to record. Suspicious, curious, and discontented glances were all directed at Linda. But what truly unsettled her wasn't the passengers, it was the terrifying calmness of Marcus Blackwell. Marcus showed no signs of anger. He didn't shout, demand, or argue. Instead, he simply stood there, looking directly at Linda with a piercing gaze, as if he had anticipated this exact outcome. Vanessa maintained her composure, but her grip on Nathan's hand had tightened, as though shielding their son from the injustice unfolding before him. Nathan, though young, continued secretly live streaming the entire event, broadcasting it to millions of viewers on social media. Amid the thick tension, a sudden announcement crackled through the intercom. The captain's deep, authoritative voice filled the cabin, breaking the eerie silence. Chief Flight Attendant Linda Harper, please report to the cockpit immediately. A ripple of shock passed through the passengers. Some exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what was happening. Linda stood motionless for a few seconds, then quickly straightened her uniform, attempting to maintain her professional demeanor. She had no idea that her career was about to take a devastating turn, the darkest chapter yet. With rigid steps, Linda made her way toward the cockpit, her high heels clicking against the floor with a weight that mirrored the sinking feeling in her stomach. As the door opened, she found the captain already waiting for her, his expression ice cold, his gaze severe. Inside the cramped cockpit, two other men were seated. One was the airline's security officer, and the other was a high-ranking representative from Skylux Airlines' corporate board. Linda blinked, a cold shiver running down her spine. This wasn't a routine call. This was an impromptu disciplinary hearing, held mid-flight. Sit down, Harper. The captain's voice was firm, not loud, but carrying an authority that left no room for argument. Linda hesitated before reluctantly sinking into a seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. Do you have any idea who you just attempted to remove from the VIP suite? The Skylux Airlines representative spoke, his voice sharp as a blade cutting straight into Linda's consciousness. I was just following protocol, Linda stammered. But the moment she uttered those words, the airline representative threw a folder onto the table in front of her. Bold letters on the document spelled out Marcus Blackwell, followed by a title that made Linda's stomach drop. Primary shareholder. Her breath hitched. Her fingers trembled as she skimmed the contents, her mind struggling to process the catastrophic truth. Marcus Blackwell wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He wielded direct influence over Skylux Airlines. The captain folded his arms, his tone turning colder. You publicly humiliated one of Skylux Airlines' most powerful stakeholders in front of hundreds of passengers. Millions of people on social media are watching this unfold. We've already received a flood of calls from the media, and this incident is now trending worldwide. Linda's panic fully set in. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, her thoughts spiraling as she envisioned the inevitable downfall ahead. Her career was collapsing before her very eyes. I didn't know, she stuttered, but the airline representative cut her off mercilessly. Ignorance is not an excuse. You let your personal biases dictate your actions. You assumed they didn't belong in the VIP suite because they didn't look like the kind of passengers you were used to serving. And now, you will face the consequences. Linda wanted to argue, to defend herself, to salvage the wreckage of her reputation, but deep down, she knew it was already over. The captain's stare was unforgiving. When this plane lands, You will be required to report directly to the executive board for a formal review. I strongly suggest you prepare for the worst." Linda sat there, heart pounding, sweat forming on her brow. She had lost everything because of one foolish, prejudiced decision. Outside the cockpit, as Linda was being reprimanded, Marcus Blackwell remained seated in the economy section, observing the events unfold with a sharp, calculated gaze. He picked up his phone and read a message from his assistant. "Everything has been arranged. When we land, she will no longer be employed by Skylux Airlines." Marcus set his phone down, a subtle smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He didn't need to do anything. Linda Harper had destroyed herself. Vanessa turned to him, her expression still cold. "Do you think she's learned her lesson?" Marcus took a sip of water before replying calmly. "Not yet, but she's about to." The plane continued its journey through the sky. But for Linda Harper, this was no longer just another flight. It was the beginning of an inevitable downfall. The landing announcement echoed through the cabin, signaling the end of the flight. The atmosphere in the VIP suite remained strangely tense. Some passengers were still whispering about the incident involving the Blackwell family, while others stole glances at Marcus, Vanessa, and Nathan, their eyes filled with admiration and curiosity. No one knew their true identities, but everyone sensed that Linda Harper had made a catastrophic mistake. In the cockpit, Linda Harper sat frozen in her seat, staring blankly at the floor. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her hands clenched tightly around her skirt as she struggled to maintain her composure. But with each passing minute, the weight of dread only grew heavier. She knew what was waiting for her when the plane landed. Outside Dubai International Airport, a group of sharply dressed individuals had arrived well before the plane touched down. Among them was Richard Hale, Executive Vice President of Skylux Airlines, accompanied by a team of lawyers, public relations staff, and senior executives. Their faces were stone cold, their silence ominous. They had seen the video. They had received calls from investors, and they knew they had to deal with the situation immediately. As the aircraft came to a full stop, passengers began standing up to retrieve their carry-ons. Linda's heart pounded like a war drum. She remained seated, unsure of what to do next. Should she walk out and apologize? Should she stay silent and wait? She had no choice. A phone rang in the cockpit. The captain answered, listened for a brief moment, and then said just one sentence. "They're waiting for you outside." Linda felt her entire body go cold. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before rising to her feet. As she stepped out of the cockpit, the other flight attendants avoided her gaze. The respect they once had for her was gone. They knew. All of them knew that Linda Harper had just destroyed her own career. As she reached the exit, Richard Hale was already standing there, flanked by 2 airport security officers. Some passengers were still disembarking and witnessed the entire scene. "Linda Harper." Richard's voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable weight behind it. Linda's throat went dry, her legs heavy as lead. I... She tried to speak, but Richard raised a hand to silence her. "You don't need to say anything." He pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. Inside was a termination letter. "You are hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately. Mr. Blackwell's complaint has been escalated to the board, and we have no choice but to terminate your employment." The surrounding passengers held their breath. Linda opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the bold termination notice at the top of the document. Her hands trembled. It was over. She wanted to say something, to plead her case, but the cold, unyielding look in Richard's eyes made any excuses die in her throat. "Turn in your company badge. Now." Linda hesitated for a brief moment before shakily removing the ID badge from around her neck and handing it over. Richard took it and gave a small nod to the security officers. "They will escort you out of the airport. Do not make this situation any worse than it already is." Linda bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, but she couldn't say anything. She turned away, head bowed, walking out under the eyes of passengers and former colleagues who once respected her. From his seat in the VIP suite, Marcus Blackwell watched the entire scene unfold through the airplane window. His face remained calm. There was no gloating, no smugness. To him, this wasn't a victory. It was simply a lesson Linda Harper had to learn. and a message to anyone who thought they could mistreat others without facing consequences. Vanessa placed a hand on his, her sharp gaze now more relaxed. "Do you think she's truly learned her lesson?" she asked. Marcus shook his head slightly, his eyes distant. "Maybe not yet, but she won't get the chance to repeat it." From the seat beside them, Nathan grinned and lifted his phone. "Dad, this video has over 1 million views already. More than some football games." Marcus let out a small chuckle before ruffling his son's hair. "Remember this, Nathan. The world isn't always fair. But if you're smart and act at the right time, you can make it fairer." Vanessa looked at her husband, then at their son, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace. They didn't need to yell. They didn't need to make a scene. They simply waited for the right moment to bring their opponent down perfectly. A few days later, Skylux Airlines issued a public apology, not just to Marcus Blackwell, but to all passengers who had ever faced discrimination on their flights. The airline also announced mandatory bias training, new service quality protocols, and stricter policies to ensure all customers received fair and equal treatment. As for Linda Harper, she disappeared from the aviation industry entirely. Unable to find another job, her name became a cautionary tale in the customer service world. Her actions had not just cost her a job, they had made her a permanent example of what happens when prejudice overrules professionalism. 3 days after the Skylux Airlines incident, social media was still ablaze with millions of shares of the video documenting the Blackwell family's discrimination. The hashtags discrimination in the sky and #Justice for Blackwell continue to dominate platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. Major news outlets, including CNN, BBC, Forbes, and the New York Times, all ran stories on the event, analyzing its impact on the airline industry and customer service policies. Experts debated how Skylux Airlines' response would not only shape its reputation, but could also result in significant financial losses if not handled correctly. Emergency meeting at Skylux Airlines headquarters. At the airline's headquarters, an emergency meeting was underway. Sitting at the head of the long conference table was Robert Langston, CEO of Skylux Airlines, a powerful man who now felt like he was sitting on a ticking time bomb. Surrounding him were senior executives, lawyers, PR strategists, and representatives from the shareholders board. Before them were stacks of news articles, filled with headlines condemning the airline, as well as financial reports showing that Skylux's stock had plummeted 8% in just 48 hours since the scandal broke. Robert Langston took a deep breath, then tapped his fingers on the table, his voice low and tense. "We need to act now. Who has a solution?" A PR strategist spoke up first. "We need to issue a public apology immediately. A real apology, not corporate jargon. If we don't, this will spiral even further out of control." A human resources executive nodded. "We also need to announce immediate changes to our customer service policies, employee training, and complaint resolution process." Robert exhaled sharply, scanning the documents in front of him until his eyes landed on a name he knew all too well: Marcus Blackwell. "What about Mr. Blackwell? Has anyone reached out to him?" The room fell silent. No one wanted to answer. Finally, Richard Hale, the executive vice president of Skylux Airlines and the man who had personally fired Linda Harper, spoke up. "I sent him a formal letter of apology, but he hasn't responded. If I had to guess, Mr. Hale, Blackwell doesn't care about a letter. He wants to see real action." Robert nodded. "Then we need to make sure he sees it." Skylux Airline? Less than 24 hours later, Skylux Airlines held a high-profile press conference at its headquarters in New York City. On stage, Robert Langston stood before dozens of reporters, cameras, and millions of people watching via livestream. With a serious expression, he began reading the airline's official statement. Skylux Airlines sincerely apologizes to Mr. Marcus Blackwell and his family for the unacceptable experience they endured on their recent flight. This incident goes against the core values we uphold for our customers. We recognize that this is not just about one event. It is a reflection of a larger issue in the airline industry. Bias and discrimination, whether intentional or not, can happen anywhere, and that is unacceptable. We are committed to making immediate changes to ensure that no passenger ever experiences this again. He then announced a series of immediate reforms. Skylux Airlines would implement mandatory unconscious bias and customer service training for all employees, from flight attendants to ground staff. A new internal oversight and reporting system to prevent discriminatory behavior. A restructured complaint resolution process, ensuring all customers receive fair and equal treatment. The creation of an independent advisory board to monitor these policies and hold the company accountable for following through on its promises. As he neared the end of his statement, Robert Langston looked straight into the cameras and declared, "We do not expect immediate forgiveness, but we promise that Skylux Airlines will become a better, fairer airline. This is not just our responsibility, it is our commitment to all customers who have placed their trust in us over the years." Marcus Blackwell's response? As soon as Skylux Airlines' statement aired, Marcus Blackwell's phone buzzed with messages from industry contacts. Some praised the airline for taking responsibility, while others remained skeptical of whether real change would happen. Sitting beside Marcus, Vanessa scrolled through the news on her phone, then glanced at her husband. "What do you think? Do you believe they'll actually change?" Marcus took a sip of his coffee, his expression unreadable. After a few moments of thought, he picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. When the person on the other end answered, he spoke with quiet authority. "I saw the press conference. You're moving in the right direction. But I have one condition." The voice on the other line hesitated. "What condition?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his tone calm yet firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "I want a seat on Skylux Airlines' internal oversight board. I want to ensure that the changes you're promising actually happen, not just as a PR stunt." There was silence on the line. Then, after a few tense seconds, the response came. "I'll take it to the higher-ups, but I'm certain they'll agree." Marcus smirked slightly, then replied with finality before ending the call. "Good, because I don't just want to see change. I want to make sure it lasts." 2 weeks after the Skylux Airlines scandal rocked the airline industry, a high-level meeting was held at the company's New York headquarters. In a luxurious boardroom on the top floor of the corporate tower, the board of directors, CEO Robert Langston, and senior executives were all present. But this time, there was a notable change. Marcus Blackwell had officially joined the meeting as an internal oversight member. Marcus sat at the head of the table, not flaunting his power, but his mere presence was enough to make everyone in the room uneasy. No one had forgotten that just 2 weeks ago, one of their own flight attendants had humiliated his family on a Skylux Airlines flight. Robert Langston held a thick folder of documents in his hands, adjusting his tie before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are convening this meeting to discuss Skylux Airlines' reform plan in line with our commitments to the public and to Mr. Blackwell. Today, we will finalize strategic changes to ensure that what happened will never happen again." All eyes turned to Marcus. He placed his hands on the table, flipping through the reports with measured calm before finally speaking. "I've reviewed your plan. It has potential, but there are key areas that need strengthening." A heavy silence fell over the room. No one dared to interrupt. "First," Marcus continued, "the unconscious bias training program you proposed needs to be upgraded. I don't want a single rush seminar and then forgotten. I want it to be a mandatory annual training course for every employee, flight attendants, ground staff, and even executives. If they don't pass the final evaluation, they will not be allowed to continue in their roles." A HR executive quickly nodded, taking notes. No one opposed it. "Second, the customer complaint resolution process must be completely overhauled. From now on, any passenger who feels discriminated against or mistreated will have the right to file a complaint directly to an independent oversight committee, bypassing internal channels. I want an external quality control team to monitor service standards, not just your own internal reviews." A few executives visibly tensed. No corporation liked outside interference in its internal affairs, but they couldn't deny this request because Marcus was no longer just a customer. He was a shareholder with influence over the airline. Robert Langston cleared his throat, trying to maintain professionalism. I understand your position, Mr. Blackwell, but can we find some flexibility in external oversight? Allowing a third party too much control might interfere with our internal management processes. Marcus's expression did not change, but his eyes grew sharper. Flexibility? He raised an eyebrow. You were more than flexible when you allowed a flight attendant to make personal judgments and humiliate a paying customer just because she thought they didn't look wealthy enough for first class. And now you want to be flexible in your oversight? I don't believe we have room for flexibility in this matter. The room fell completely silent. A few executives exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to contradict him. Robert Langston sighed, then nodded. Understood. We will hire an external service quality oversight firm to ensure transparency. All customer complaints will be handled by them before reaching upper management. Marcus nodded in approval, then continued. Third, I want Skylux Airlines to establish a special monitoring division to oversee the entire VIP passenger experience, not to provide preferential treatment, but to ensure that every customer is treated fairly, regardless of how they look or where they come from. A few executives looked relieved at this request, as it seemed less confrontational than his previous demands. After extensive discussions, every condition Marcus put forward was accepted. The executives knew that resisting him would mean provoking someone with immense influence, and they could not afford another scandal. As the meeting concluded, Robert Langston stood up and extended his hand toward Marcus, for the first time with genuine respect. We won't let you down, Mr. Blackwell. Marcus shook his hand but did not smile. I don't care if you let me down. I only care if Skylux Airlines actually changes. 3 months later, the fall of Linda Harper. 3 months after being fired from Skylux Airlines, Linda Harper sat in her small apartment on the outskirts of New York, staring blankly at her computer screen. On it were dozens of unanswered job applications she had sent over the past 2 months. Every single one had been ignored. Linda was no longer a prestigious chief flight attendant for a luxury airline. She was no longer walking down first-class aisles in a pristine uniform, feeling a sense of authority and pride. Now, she was just an unemployed middle-aged woman shunned by the entire airline industry. When the scandal broke, Skylux Airlines had swiftly terminated her to contain the backlash. But what Linda hadn't expected was that her name and face would be plastered all over social media, making her a symbol of discrimination in the service industry. A simple Google search of Linda Harper pulled up hundreds of articles, viral videos, and outraged comments from the public. Former flight attendant fired mid-flight for discrimination. A costly lesson, how one mistake can destroy an entire career. Unconscious bias or outright prejudice, the Linda Harper case still sparks debate. No airline wanted to hire her. Former colleagues distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with her name. Linda had tried applying to smaller airlines, but every rejection was the same. Some companies even sent blunt responses. We cannot employ someone with a history of customer discrimination. She sat there in silence, realizing the world had completely shut her out. Denied. Even in basic jobs, months of unemployment drained her finances. She could no longer afford her New York apartment and had to move to a smaller town where rent was cheaper. Determined to rebuild her life, Linda started applying for customer service jobs, hotels, restaurants, even supermarkets. But her past followed her everywhere. One afternoon, she interviewed for a receptionist job at a mid-tier hotel. The hiring manager, a young, friendly-looking woman, scanned her resume and suddenly paused. You worked for Skylux Airlines? She asked. Linda tried to keep her voice steady. Yes, I was a chief flight attendant. A brief silence. The woman's expression shifted. I've heard about your case online. To be honest, I don't think our hotel can take the risk of hiring someone connected to such a high-profile controversy. Linda's face flushed. But it was a misunderstanding, she pleaded. The manager gave a polite but firm shake of her head. Maybe, But your reputation is already set. I'm sorry. Linda walked out of the hotel with heavy steps, finally facing the bitter truth. Her career was beyond saving. After months of rejections, Linda resigned herself to taking a part-time job at a small coffee shop in the outskirts of town. Gone were the days of glamorous flights and first-class service. Now she wore a simple apron, standing behind a cash register, serving customers their morning coffee. A familiar face walks in. One afternoon, as Linda stood behind the counter, making lattes and ringing up orders, a tall man in an elegant dark suit walked through the door. Her heart stopped. Marcus Blackwell. He was holding his phone, looking completely calm and composed, as if he didn't even recognize her. Linda's pulse quickened. She wanted to turn away, but it was too late. Marcus looked directly at her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he casually stepped forward to the counter. Black coffee, no sugar. His voice was calm, indifferent, as if she was just another ordinary barista. Linda forced herself to stay composed. You want coffee? She stammered. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. That's what I ordered. Linda quickly prepared the drink, but her hands trembled. When she handed the cup to him, she hesitated. I'm really sorry. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus took the cup, his expression unreadable, not angry, not satisfied, simply indifferent. I don't need your apology. His tone was quiet, but it carried weight. Linda felt a deep, invisible blow to her pride. Marcus wasn't angry. He simply didn't care anymore. He didn't need revenge. Life had already delivered Linda Harper the punishment she deserved. Without another word, Marcus turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Linda standing there, realizing she had become invisible to the people she once wronged. 2 years later, the lasting impact of the Skylux Airlines scandal. 2 years had passed since the Skylux Airlines scandal shook the airline industry, but its effects still reverberated across the sector. The incident didn't just cost one chief flight attendant her job, it ignited a sweeping wave of reforms in how airlines treated their passengers. At the center of it all was Marcus Blackwell, the man who had once been unjustly humiliated on a Skylux flight. But instead of letting the incident be just another forgotten controversy, he turned his story into a defining case study on justice and corporate accountability. More importantly, the scandal had forced an industry-wide reckoning, not just at Skylux, but across the entire aviation sector. Skylux Airlines, from scandal to industry leader. Under Marcus Blackwell's oversight, Skylux Airlines underwent radical reforms to restore its reputation. 100% of employees, from flight attendants and ground staff to executives, were required to complete unconscious bias and customer service training. Those who failed the final exam were disqualified from continuing in their roles. The training was not a one-time event, but an annual requirement, ensuring that Skylux employees continuously upheld the highest standards of professionalism. An independent monitoring committee was established to handle passenger complaints. Any reports of discrimination or misconduct were investigated seriously, and employees found guilty were immediately suspended and required to undergo retraining before being reconsidered for their jobs. A specialized department was created to oversee the experience of both VIP and economy passengers, ensuring no traveler was treated unfairly based on appearance, background, or perceived status. These sweeping changes quickly transformed Skylux Airlines into one of the top-rated airlines in the world. Within just 2 years, Skylux was no longer remembered for scandal. Instead, it had become a pioneer of transparency and fairness in aviation. Forbes and Business Insider hailed Skylux Airlines as one of the fastest improving airlines globally. The airline's revenue rebounded beyond expectations, surpassing its pre-scandal projections. Customer complaints dropped by more than 70% compared to 2 years prior. Skylux's customer service ratings outperformed those of its major competitors. What had once seemed like a fatal PR disaster had now become a symbol of industry reform, making Skylux Airlines the gold standard for customer service in aviation. The ripple effect on the airline industry. Skylux's transformation sent shockwaves through the airline industry, forcing other major carriers to reevaluate their own policies. United Airlines, British Airways, and Delta Airlines all faced mounting pressure from the public to review their customer service protocols. Other discrimination cases within the industry quickly surfaced, forcing airlines to change their policies or risk public backlash. The International Air Transport Association (IATA) introduced new global standards for customer service, mandating airlines to improve training, monitoring, and accountability. Major airlines adopted independent customer service monitoring teams, following the Skylux model to prevent future scandals. Even airline executives around the world began studying Marcus Blackwell's reforms, incorporating his strategies into their own corporate governance. The rise of passenger awareness and accountability. Beyond corporate changes, passenger behavior also shifted dramatically. Before the Skylux scandal, many passengers simply endured discrimination or poor treatment in silence. But after Marcus Blackwell's case, the world had changed. Passengers became more vocal about their rights, no longer accepting unfair treatment. If a passenger was mistreated, it took only seconds for a video to go viral, putting immediate pressure on airlines to respond. Consumer protection organizations for airline passengers emerged, ensuring airlines remained accountable for their actions. The Marcus Blackwell effect had revolutionized air travel, forcing airlines to recognize that customer service was no longer just a courtesy, it was a necessity for survival. Marcus Blackwell, the man who changed the skies. Even after 2 years, Marcus Blackwell remained an active force in Skylux Airlines, ensuring that the changes he fought for were permanent. But his influence extended far beyond Skylux. He became a highly sought-after keynote speaker, presenting at global business and leadership conferences on how a personal injustice could lead to a corporate revolution. His story became a case study at Harvard and Stanford business schools, used by professors to teach the power of consumer influence and the dangers of bias in business. Marcus wasn't just a successful businessman anymore, he was a symbol of change, ensuring that millions of airline passengers received fair treatment every time they boarded a flight. The fate of Linda Harper, a cautionary tale. While Marcus Blackwell's name became synonymous with justice, Linda Harper's name faded into oblivion. The former chief flight attendant never found another job in aviation. No airline dared to hire her, fearing the public backlash that would come with her name. Even in other service industries, her reputation followed her. Her name became a permanent stain on the internet. Major companies refused to hire her, viewing her past as too great of a liability. In the end, Linda Harper disappeared from the industry, forced to relocate to a small town, working menial jobs with no connection to the world she once belonged to. She was no longer talked about, no longer infamous. She was simply forgotten. And perhaps that was the worst punishment of all, to be completely erased from the industry she once took pride in. The legacy of the Skylux scandal. The Skylux Airlines controversy changed aviation forever. Skylux Airlines became a leader in customer service and fairness, no longer just another airline, but a pioneer in ethical aviation policies. Other airlines rushed to follow suit, adopting new policies to ensure fair treatment of passengers. Travelers worldwide understood that they had rights, and if they stood together, they could demand real change. On that fateful day, Marcus Blackwell hadn't just stood up for his family. He had stood up for millions of passengers who would fly after him. He wasn't the most powerful man in the world, but he was the man who refused to stay silent when something was wrong. And because of that, the world changed. 2 years later, the legacy of a revolution. 2 years after Skylux Airlines became a symbol of change in the aviation industry, Marcus Blackwell continued his role overseeing the airline's customer service policies. However, as his influence and reputation grew, he found himself flooded with offers from major corporations across various industries, not just in aviation, but in hospitality, finance, and technology. These companies wanted his expertise in transforming customer experience, ensuring they didn't repeat the same mistakes Skylux had made. At first, Marcus declined most offers, believing that true change doesn't come from one person, but from systems that force companies to improve in order to survive. But the more he observed, the more he realized that many industries face the same issues, from discrimination to poor customer service and lack of transparency in complaint handling. A new vision: AI powered customer service. At a business conference in London, Marcus met a group of young tech entrepreneurs working in artificial intelligence. They pitched a bold idea: an AI driven platform capable of monitoring and analyzing customer service in real time, providing instant feedback on customer satisfaction, detecting discriminatory behavior or violations of service standards. This technology wasn't limited to aviation. It could be applied to hotels, restaurants, and even healthcare. Marcus saw its potential immediately. For years, companies only reacted after a scandal went viral. But with AI-driven oversight, they could identify and address issues before they escalated into major problems. So he invested, not just with money, but with his experience and vision. With Marcus's reputation and support from top investors, the AI pilot program was launched in major airports and hotels. The results were astonishing. Employees performed better knowing their service was objectively monitored. Customer service ratings improved dramatically across multiple industries. Instances of discrimination, which previously went unnoticed, were now immediately flagged and addressed. Within a year, Marcus's AI platform became an essential tool for customer service management, rapidly adopted by global corporations. Balancing success and family. Despite his expanding influence, Marcus remained deeply connected to his family. His wife, Vanessa, had launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of discrimination across various industries. They provided legal assistance, psychological counseling, workshops on customer rights and advocacy. Their son, Nathan, now 12 years old, became fascinated by technology and business, often accompanying Marcus to conferences. During one AI summit, Nathan posed a profound question: Dad, if this technology monitors people, will it actually make them better, or just make them afraid of getting caught? Marcus smiled. The goal isn't surveillance. It's creating an environment where people have a chance to learn and correct themselves before it's too late. Nathan nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson his father had spent years teaching the world. An unexpected message. One afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected email. The sender, Linda Harper. The message was short but powerful. Linda acknowledged the price she had paid for her mistake. She didn't write to seek forgiveness, but to tell Marcus that his actions had changed her perspective on the world. She revealed that she was now working for a nonprofit, training individuals who had lost jobs due to misconduct, helping them rebuild their professional skills and find second chances. Her closing words were simple: "Thank you for showing me that change is possible, even if it comes later than expected." Marcus closed his laptop, gazing out the window. He wasn't sure if he should respond, but in that moment, he felt at peace. He had never sought revenge. He had never cared whether Linda regretted her actions. But knowing that his story not only changed an industry, but also helped someone find redemption, that was the best ending he could have hoped for. The power of one decision. Throughout his life, Marcus Blackwell proved one simple truth: a single event, one moment of injustice, can spark monumental change. And with the right people, the right technology, and a commitment to fairness, the world could become a better place. Not by miracles, but by the courage of those willing to change it. The legacy of Marcus Blackwell, a testament to change. Looking back on Marcus Blackwell's journey, one undeniable truth emerges. Justice does not always arrive immediately, but it always finds those who are patient and determined enough to fight for what is right. His story is not just about an airline scandal or a corporate overhaul. It is a testament to the power of change. In life, we all encounter moments of injustice, moments where we feel undervalued, misjudged, or dismissed by unfair biases. But what truly matters is not how we are treated, but how we choose to respond. If Marcus had remained silent, Skylux Airlines might have continued operating under the same flawed system, and countless other passengers would have endured similar mistreatment. Instead, he took action, and from a single act of discrimination, he sparked a movement that reshaped an entire industry. The ripple effect of every action. Marcus's story is also a stark reminder that every action, no matter how small, has consequences. Linda Harper once believed that her subjective decision would only impact one family for a brief moment, but that moment destroyed her career and changed the trajectory of an entire industry. In a hyper-connected world where information spreads faster than ever, a reckless decision can erase everything in an instant. But on the flip side, acts of integrity and efforts to create positive change can spread even more powerfully. What would you do? If you ever find yourself in a moment of injustice, what will you choose? Will you stay silent and endure it? Or will you stand up and fight for fairness? Will you let mistakes define you? Or will you learn from them and become better? The story of Marcus Blackwell is not just his own. It is the story of all of us. And perhaps its most important lesson is this: change does not come from the most powerful people. It comes from ordinary individuals who have the courage to speak up and take action for what is right,